Pierre Lebrun caught up with Kent Hughes at the draft combine, and Hughes said that, yeah, he thinks he will be making another big trade at the draft, even indicating he could trade up. There is a lot of stuff that Kent said, plus the Habs being linked to a player that, well, we've been linked to before, plus Corey Pronman of The Athletic, a guy who has notoriously been right on almost each of his last few drafts, especially the top 5, has doubled down on the Habs taking a guy that we all want them to take, so you're going to want to stick around for all of that coming up on this episode of Habs Digest. But Jesse, we're going to open with something a bit different, and we're going to talk about some moves the Habs have to make first. Now, I want to give some credit to Marco D'Amico, who highlighted this in an article about a week ago on Montreal Hockey Now, so go check that out. I'll link that down in the description. But I want to talk about this, Jesse, and it's the Habs' impending restricted free agents. And those are Justin Barron, Matthias Norlinder, Philip Sederqvist, Arber Xhekaj, Elias Anderson, and Jesse Ylönen. Now, the choices are to let these guys go. They are to give them the qualifying offer, which is a certain number, a certain amount of money, and then they'll stick around for 1 year, or you can sign them to an extension or a bridge deal or whatever it might be. Now, in my mind, Xhekaj is a lock. I think Sederqvist and Norlinder are probably going to get let go. I think the interesting ones are Barron and Ylönen, and I don't think they're ready to give up on Barron. I'm seeing a lot of people say they might stick with Ylönen going long-term, but Jesse, I wanted to hear your thoughts. I mean, I think we're both pretty certain about Xhekaj, but when it comes to guys like Barron and Ylönen, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's going to be even harder to find a chair in Montreal coming up very shortly, right? With 6 RFAs, 11 contract spots remaining with our boy Arber Xhekaj. Of course, we got to start there, right? Of course, he's going to be re-signed, but what type of deal is he going to get?
Mm-hmm.
I think that Arber Xhekaj is going to be really well served by a bridge deal where he's really going to be able to show his valor even more. I think that this is going to be so good for him in the long run. He's really going to be able to show what type of amazing player, really reinforce that for the Montreal Canadiens and really get that big payday coming up, Now kind of sticking with defense, with Justin Barron, as he mentioned, right? Like, even though his career's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride, like, I'm not giving up on this guy. I think that there's still some upside. We know how crowded our D is right now, but I feel like you got to hold on to him. You got to get a better feel of where he's really at, right? And lastly, with like Jesse Ylönen, like, you got to feel like just because maybe we resign some of these players doesn't necessarily mean that they're part of our long-term future, right? We could be very much, I could see Ylönen where it's, okay, sign him, but probably not fitting long-term to probably make it more feasible to move him in a trade, right? We know that things are getting crowded, right? Like, there's going to be a lot of roster moves. A lot of decisions are going to be coming up June 30th, right? So this is incoming. We have so many players. So you have to feel like Ylönen will be best served somewhere else at this point in time. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a deal in the meantime.
Yeah, it's weird because the Habs are kind of going out looking at players from different leagues, signing them to roster spots, right? And they only have, I think, 10 left. So honestly, I might take a minority opinion and say they don't bring Ylönen back. He's a shootout specialist. He's good, but to me, like, yeah, you could maybe get something in a trade for him, but I don't think it's going to be much. And I feel like it'll just take 1 or 2 players that the Habs quite like to give them maybe a shot over Ylönen. Maybe that's a hot take. I actually think it is. As for the other guys, I completely agree. I think Xhekaj's going to get a bridge. I think that serves him very well and the organization very well. He'll be able to prove himself and not have to sign a long-term contract coming off some shoulder surgeries. He'll be able to show what he can give, and it gives the organization a couple of years of freedom. The one guy I wanted to talk about is Elias Anderson. Because I think if you can bring him back, I think you should. In Laval, he was very, very good. Not an NHL level guy, but there's been a lot of rumblings of him going over to Europe. But hey, there's a lot of decisions to make, a lot of stuff coming up. Let us know down below what your thoughts are. I think we're pretty much a consensus that Barron will at least get a qualifying offer. That's the thought. Xhekaj will probably get a bridge deal. I'm of the mind that Ylönen might get let go, if any of these guys might get let go, other than the guys we kind of just tossed out at the beginning. But hey, we'd love to hear from you guys. But we're going to get into some of the more interesting stuff. And now we're talking about the draft. And oh boy, Corey Pronman is doubling down. Yes, Corey Pronman, he has done a lot of mock drafts. They do a lot of mock drafts over at The Athletic, Jesse. And Corey Pronman, though, his top 5s over the last 3 years have almost been exactly bang on every year, with like a couple of players switching spots here and there. But he's been very, very accurate, as he has access to a lot of pretty good information in the scouting sphere. And, well, what does his most recent one say? Well, let's just show you. He has Ivan Demidov going to Montreal again. Now, he said this earlier. Some mock drafts, he actually has Demidov ranked at like 8th in his overall prospect ranking, but he believes that he'll go at 5th to Montreal. And the interesting thing about this, Jesse, is the names going before him. It's Macklin Celebrini at 1, of course. Artem Levshunov at number 2 to Chicago. Salayev at 3 to the Ducks, who do need a defenseman. And Cayden Lindstrom going at 4 to the Blue Jackets, a guy that I've seen sliding down some draft boards. But Jesse, to see this guy, he's doubling down again. The closer he gets to the draft, the more information he has. I would not be shocked to see this happen. Now, as he says, and a lot of people say, it comes down to what Chicago decides to do. If they decide on Demidov, then that's it. Obviously, they'll take him. But it's really up to them, because in his mind, in Pronman's mind, it doesn't seem like Anaheim or Columbus will be taking Demidov, and I think this bodes very, very well for us.
I like this. You know, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I like seeing it, and I would very much love for this to happen, right? This is kind of like the best possible situation that could happen for the Montreal Canadiens here, right? Like, this is going to be so unpredictable, this draft coming up. Shameless plug for the live that we're going to have for this draft, because there's going to be just so much stuff going on left, right, and center, right? You know, as we're going to even get into a little bit more, right? But it's going to be like just completely unpredictable. But like, you have to feel like if you're building like a true contender, it's like it makes sense often to build from the back out. Like, a lot of these teams ahead of Montreal would be well served to get, you know, a great defenseman in the year of the defenseman at this NHL draft, right? There's going to be a lot of great ones. So this might be kind of our saving grace, which allows this player to kind of slide to us here. So, I mean, we're keeping our fingers crossed.
And you know what's funny is now the more I'm seeing Demidov being mocked to Montreal, the more I'm seeing Habs fans and fans of other teams coming in and saying, oh yeah, but you know, there's so many concerns with him, right? It only makes sense that he's fun. This is a guy that was number 2 consensus basically all year, even until his last game, you know, and now other players are just surpassing him for this reason or another. But regardless, he was the number 2 prospect a long time this year for a reason. Some people have him as good, or maybe almost as good as prospect as Matvei Michkov. Let us know your thoughts about Ivan Demidov down below, because I mean, again, I'm super thrilled with the idea that he could land in Montreal, and even if he doesn't, there's a lot of great players, and yeah, we'll be getting into that in our live stream. Gonna also plug that on draft day. Be here. We're gonna be talking about all of it. But it's the final topic, Jesse, and before we get into the final topic, I just wanted to ask you guys to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. If you're watching at this point and you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. We got daily Habs news, but we got to talk about Kent Hughes, Jesse, and we got some interesting quotes from him. Now, yesterday, Pierre LeBrun was at the draft combine, and he was catching up with some GMs, including Kent. Kent was asked about maybe getting another player like Dach or Newhook, swinging for another trade like this. He said, yeah, I think so. I think we could do it. If we can get a player, if we can trade up in the draft, we have to look at any way we can improve this team. We won't be limited to something that has to make us better next season, but if it does, call that icing on the cake. And he went on to say that he believes this draft is really not predictable. Now, last year, they got a lot of offers for number 5 because the top 4 was pretty close to consensus, but this year, no one really knows where players are going to land, right? Jesse, no one knows maybe if a guy's going to go at number 5 or number 15 with a lot of cases. But all this indicates, even him mentioning trading up in the draft is something we've speculated about, but not something we realistically thought about. To have him answer that in a question about trading for another player is unbelievable. This is something that, you know, hearing from Kent Hughes himself has got me really, really excited. It's one thing to hear from certain reporters, we feel like Montreal's doing this. Kent's like, yeah, I think we can make a trade. I think we could trade up at the draft. Anything is possible. And oh man, am I ever psyched.
I love this, and I'm so happy that you know, Kent Hughes is really aggressively targeting the players that this organization really needs, right? And you have to feel like every spot really matters, right? Mm-hmm. And for the Montreal Canadiens, possibly trading up, even if it's just one spot, could be the difference between either getting a Demidov or a Lindstrom or missing out on one of those 2 players. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, not the end of the world if they don't get one of those 2, but I think it would be much better for the Montreal Canadiens to do that. But again, as we've kind of mentioned, it's like, we're not going to know what's really happening until like the last couple, like this is going to come down right to the wire. If Kent Hughes is going to have to trade up, he's going to have to do it very early on, try to get some type of read of what's going to happen ahead of him, because it's going to be predicated by the moves of the teams ahead of him, right? Mm-hmm. So this is definitely going to be a fluid situation. I think the Canadiens are right to know what they want and really to actively make moves to get that specifically.
It's interesting because we've seen handshake deals before where teams will give a little extra incentive so that another team doesn't take a player. I mean, what better example than like the Sedins when Brian Burke sort of had a handshake agreement about Patrick Steffen going number 1 to Atlanta, stuff like that. So, you know, if Kent Hughes decides to trade up, maybe has a handshake deal with another team, or say switch from 5th to 4th and say, hey, as long as the team ahead of me, you know, it doesn't take, there could be so many crazy things going down on the draft floor. And I think Kent is ready to deal with that. But there's one other thing we wanted to talk about, Jesse. Now, of course, Kent talked about potentially swinging a trade for another impact player, another young guy. Look, this subject is a bit overblown, but Pierre LeBrun in his article for The Athletic said, I also believe Anaheim and Montreal have reconnected on Zegras. Now, he did say that there's not really much momentum to this. It's just that they've reconnected. You know, Anaheim has been actively shopping him. Now, while Pat Verbeek himself, the GM of the Ducks, said that, you know, I don't want to comment on this, is what he said. He said, I'm not commenting on the Zegras stuff. Some other insiders, some other executives, some other managers around the league have indicated to Pierre LeBrun that Zegras has been getting shopped, which is something that, well, that's a bit interesting to hear, because we've kind of heard as well that Verbeek kind of, why would they move him, you know, this kind of, but to hear he's actually getting shopped now, and we're getting close to the draft, and we're hearing the Habs have connected on him and all this stuff. I don't think this is a likely possibility, and I think Pierre LeBrun kind of said that as well, but, you know, it's very interesting to me that it's happening again, Jesse, and these rumors don't come out of nowhere, and I don't know if I want to say I'm scared of what might come, but you never know what the price might be, and in a draft like this, maybe Anaheim will pay a premium.
We know that Anaheim's looking for more help on defense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like the Zegras trade is like the easier trade to make for what Anaheim needs. And obviously, you could argue we need that offensive help, but same time, I feel like, that being said, still the Natchez trade seems more likely to me, but also probably better for this team overall. I know that some people still kind of want that even more size kind of into our top six, right? But kind of depending on what we can get this draft year, I feel like we're kind of remedying a lot of those issues there. So, you know, Cole Caufield would probably be happy with that as well. I know a lot of Montreal Canadiens are kind of torn on, but I'm kind of the opinion that we'd be better served with another player, just kind of putting culture as just the most important thing in this organization, right? And I believe we're going to be able to find that right player for us this summer.
That's the thing. When you're drafting, you can draft for that. And so whether it's Demidov, whether it's Lindstrom, whether it's someone else, I think I'd rather them than Zegras if, you know, Anaheim comes demanding the 5th overall pick. But hey, you know, it is what it is. I don't want them, but maybe some of you do. We'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this down below. But that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for all your guys' support. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.